Hi, Tina. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Can you tell us what happened today?
Well, we just left the press conference not too long ago, and we're here down at Kitts Beach with tankers in our background, which is literally going to be ground zero if this pipeline gets built. At the press conference today, there is a unanimous consensus that there will be absolutely no pipeline built, according to the Grand Chief, as well as the other political leaders on the panel, and also the politicians that joined them on the panel today. There's a number of things at hand, and certainly Mayor Corrigan sums it up very nicely in this next clip.
I'm embarrassed that our Prime Minister and a Premier of our province are kowtowing to an American multinational oil company. And one of the things you're learning here as media and as citizens is this is the influence that the oil lobby has had in the back rooms of government for decades. We are just now being able to see that influence in front of our very eyes. The reality is that these governments have quietly, behind the scenes, been approving what oil companies do without putting in the proper protections for our citizens or considering the long-term and generational impacts of the things that they are doing. There is no strategy. There is no national plan. This is simply obedience to the corporate will.
Tina, what do you think will happen next for those opposing the project?
Well, I think there's no question at all that will be civil disobedience right up and down this pipeline route. It literally runs over 1,000 kilometers, and what I heard today was there will be more actions up on Burnaby Mountain, more actions on the other First Nations that are opposed to this pipeline. And I think Bob Chamberlain also talks that this deadline proposed by Kinder Morgan of May 31st is just ridiculous for the governments to get their act in order. Obviously, they can't agree, as we've seen by this last weekend's meeting.
So when a company from the United States declares that May 31st is the drop deadline to go forward, this is an ultimatum to the Canadian government to run over and disregard the human rights of Aboriginal people in Canada. And I want to believe that Canadians find this unacceptable. This country has a rich profile of immigrants from many other places in the world that escaped human rights. And they've come to Canada believing that this is a just and fair society. And we cannot frame this in any less a way. And if the government can find the money and the legislative powers to push a pipeline through, my question is, why do they not put that same level of attention, effort, and resources into redefining this country for the proper place and space for First Nations people to have authority within the traditional lands that have been ours since time immemorial?
The Member of Parliament for Burnaby South was in attendance. He was also arrested while protesting recently at the Kinder Morgan tank farm. What did he have to say?
Well, he certainly talked that there's been some heavy-handed threats coming from Ottawa, including the potential for the Army to step in with those on the front lines. And so he's been fighting this tooth and nail since he is the representative for Burnaby South and lives literally right in the same area where the Kinder Morgan had a pipeline spill in 2007. There's a lot on the line for his constituents as well as himself.
The National Energy Board review process was deeply flawed, and it was not appropriate. The Prime Minister promised during the election that he would redo the process and make Kinder Morgan resubmit. He broke that promise, and he's moving ahead with this pipeline.
This was a press conference about the Indigenous opposition. What was the response from Grand Chief Stuart Phillips?
Well, Grand Chief Stuart Phillip always has a lot to say in regards to, 100% consent is needed for this project to go through, and he's quite positive that there is not 100% for this project to go through. So he's confident that this will indeed escalate into more standoffs on the front line for sure.
Had Trudeau followed through with his commitments, we would have rigorous environmental oversight processes in place. The whole issue of consultation is a red herring. It's a distraction, because in the post-Chilcotin era, the legal bar has been raised to consent, and there is no consent. The answer is still no. The Kinder Morgan Trans Mountain Pipeline will never be built.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, Tina. It sounds like there's still a lot more discussions to go on.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.